what's exciting about that is now when you add those layers on, that's where you see what we call this launch point of kiddos really reach their speech comes back online. Their social emotional regulation comes back online. It starts with the last thing I should say about mapping this out. We see these changes not only on their scans, you can see this on what are called neurological soft signs. So parents, it's a long journey with a lot of trips and a lot of things. And so we have these scans to track changes, but you're also going to see your child start to finally sleep through the night. You're going to start to see your child actually poop without Miralax and prunes and suppositories and everything else, okay? You're going to see your child calm and not have massive tantrums and meltdowns during transitions. So there will be all of these neurophysiological soft signs and milestones along the way that'll tell us, hey, we're on the way to recovery.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. I am so excited that you're here. I know this conversation for so many families, this is going to resonate and hopefully really change the way you think about raising your children and some behavioral issues that you may be facing. And our guest today is a friend, and I'm so excited that he's back for a second time to have this conversation. It's Dr. Tony Ebel. He is the lead writer and educational guide for PX Docs. He's a certified pediatric and wellness chiropractor, but he's also been training other docs all over the country. So wherever you might live, you may actually have access to somebody that he has personally trained through his programs. And he specializes in pediatric neurodevelopment. That's what we're going to get into today. Things like autism, ADD, ADHD, sensory processing disorder, and so much more. So Dr. Tony's passion is contagious. He loves what he does, and the integrity of how he does it comes through every single thing that he touches. So Dr. Tony, my friend, thank you so much for joining us for a second time. It's so good to have you back on the show.
Thank you for the opportunity. Any and every opportunity you can have to create impact on kids and families is always something we go full force at. But when you get to connect with a community like this, I don't think there's a single patient. We see like 1,100, 1,200 patients a week in our clinic, and then all the other docs and everything else. Everyone loves this podcast, loves you guys. When they think we are the coolest people in the world that we know Courtney, Courtney, Dr. Motley, Dr. Axe. And so you better believe we're riding that to the moon here to help more families with you rock stars. So thank you for this. This is where I kind of got my start in pediatrics, is really just going deep with these, autism, sensory, and these challenges. So very excited to help families find some answers that I promise you aren't what we're going to discuss here isn't really discussed anywhere else. And so it's something parents really need to know.
I should have added hype man to your bio, because you are like the ultimate cheerleader. So I love that about you. And you're not just like that, like, one off. Like, if you know Dr. Ebel, like, that is who he is with everybody. So if you need a champion and a cheerleader in your corner, you just need to follow the work that this man does, because you will be blessed by it. You will feel important. You will feel seen. You will feel valued, because that's just how he lives. So anyway, I love that about you. But I love that we're going to dive into kind of these disorders that we see amongst a lot of children. And I took a little gander over to the CDC's website this morning, because I thought I would love just to set the scenery for a lot of people, because it used to be that if you had a child that was somewhere on the spectrum of autism, or had a child with ADD or ADHD, it was like very rare. You maybe felt like you were the parent, the outlying parent. So here's what we do know. Well, I say here's what we do know, but this is actually what the CDC has reported. Okay, so take that with a grain of salt. Yeah. But what they said is the prevalence is about 1 in 36 children has been identified with autism spectrum disorder. Okay, 1 in 36. Now, it's also more common, 4 times more common among boys than girls. But here's what they did. They did a study between 2009 and 2017, and 1 in 6 children age 3 to 17 were diagnosed with a developmental disability as reported by parents that included autism, ADD, ADHD, cerebral palsy, and several others. So 1 in 6 is, to me, like, that is unbelievable. That is a wildly high statistic. So I think it is clearly very important that we have these conversations, because if that didn't exist 20, 50 years ago, and and some people, some doctors and medical community may say it's genetic factors only. Like, you cannot refute the evidence that with that level of increase in prevalence, there's got to be an environmental component.
Yeah.
So I would love to just kick you off there.
Yeah.
Like, what are you seeing as somebody that is an expert in this field that is contributing to the skyrocketing prevalence of things like ADD and ASD?
Yeah, love it. Here's what I want to tell parents right out of the gates. We are seeing it all. We do understand it all. We can make sense of it all, and we're doing something about it. Now, that's a big statement right out of the gates, and we got a whole awesome episode to break that down. But I first saw what was going on, like what was actually going on, which is a stark contrast to what the CDC sees, right? Which is kind of across the board. We can say that generally with autism. So when I got started into my pediatric journey, which was a big pivot shift for me when my family started, went from regular chiropractor to wanting to be a sensory spectrum autism obsessed pediatric specialist. And my story's in that. You'll hear today, like, I'm a great hype man because I am as ADHD and sensory as it gets, but I'm now a well-balanced, well-adjusted, taking that from a disorder, right? So autism spectrum disorder or ADHD, hyperactivity disorder, and turning it into a superpower, which is absolutely the path that these kids and families can go on when you see what's really going on here. And those numbers really absolutely stink because that study, the latest one on the CDC site, it's 5 years old. It's using data from a long time. And so we now know this perfect storm, as we call it, and we'll teach it today, has been brewing for the last generation or two since these significant environmental, not genetic shifts have occurred. And it's fueling that dramatic rise. So I'll plant this in parents' memories through a story. So I have been, my whole 15-year career focused on this. And so I've sought out every single research study and every single research presenter. And I've sat through just these conferences and webinars and seminars and read through the thickest of textbooks you can get. And I was presenting to a researcher whose expertise is gastrointestinal challenges. He's one of the pioneers of gut, immune, brain triad inflammation, which is a super important conversation here, right? For autism and all of health. And so one that this audience is very aware of. And so he was really presenting a presentation I had heard before that night. And he was saying about toxins. So his real take home was toxins and these different ways, whether they're inhaled, environmental, ingested, dietary, and so forth, or injected from medical interventions. Since we've seen this massive increase in toxic load for kids, he showed an actual graph of autism where you see it growing slowly, 50s, 60s, 70s in prevalence. And then it's what's called a hockey stick spike in research or any data presentation. And he made this statement, Courtney. He said, anytime, because he's a researcher, anytime you see a hockey stick spike in the incidence of any disease, it immediately ceases to be genetic, right? You automatically know this is not a genetic disorder only because genetics take thousands of years to change, right? Because of the way God programmed us to be adaptable. And he said, anytime you see a hockey stick spike in the prevalence of a disease, here in this case, autism, it must be due to one, maybe two factors that are fueling that dramatic rise. So you know me, Mr. Chatty McChatterson, Courtney. So he's signing, then he gets done with his presentation and he's signing his book and everybody's like, I just want to meet you. And I'm like, I got questions for you, bro. Pull up a chair, And so he doesn't know me from Adam. And I roll up to him and I said, hey, in your presentation, you just said one, maybe two. And I had been studying and presenting, because I had put it all together, this perfect storm theory and scientific presentation of autism and ADHD, that it's a multitude of environmental factors. Now, at this stage in my career, moms and dads, what I understood it as is that all these things are bad. So we must address all these things, and we'll get to those things. All these things are bad. They all contribute. So my job clinically, I built this whole multi-integrated functional I was doing functional medicine before it was cool, y'all. All right. The gray and the beard, been at it, a hot minute. And we were doing all these things. And I asked him, I said, did you say maybe two as a figure of speech and a throw off comment? Or do you actually think there's two? Because he just presented all about toxins. And he said, actually, I kind of stunned him with this question, right? He's like, I think it was just a figure of speech. It's toxins and they get into the gut and they cause inflammation and they mess with the microbiome and they mess with the immune system and they mess with metabolic. And he's right. And that's right. And that's right. And I said, I think I know the maybe too. What has shifted dramatically in the last generation or two, moms and dads, while we've seen this massive rise in autism, is not just our exposure to toxins and a poor lifestyle. There's been chemicals and medications around since the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And some would argue, in certain ways, more so, right? With what we were exposed to with kids and pregnancy and so forth during that time. What has shifted is birth interventions and maternal distress. And so what so many families with autism and ADHD and sensory, once they exhaust the traditional pediatrician who still blames genetics, it's wild. At least now on the CDC, did you read it? They're like, now we think it's a combination of genetic. Once they say the word environment, which must have been so painful for them to write, right? I can imagine they're right. Like, you sure you want me to write this on here, on our website? But they don't open that box, right? They don't go down that road of what those environmental things are. So what we now know is what they are. And parents, I need you to hear this one, in what order our children are exposed to these different stressors, because autism, ADHD, sensory, it's a multifactorial neurological disorder that then gets into the gut, that then gets into their motor system, that then gets into their immune system. So we got to get into their central and autonomic nervous system, because that's where the storm first brews, to get them out of the storm fully and foundationally.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to break it down like that, because I don't know that I've ever thought about it as a sequence, and as opposed to just this like hammering onslaught of things that's like, hey, you were fine. And then all of a sudden now we have these exposures or maybe contaminants or whatever that are just now turning genes on in a different way, or bending, or manipulating somehow the genetic expression of those genes. So maybe start there, because for somebody that is like, they're deep in the weeds with their kids and they're trying to figure out what their options are, maybe explain like how you work with parents from start to finish, because what is it that you tackle first? Is it the gut? Is it the vagus nerve? Like how do you go about helping the body where you're not creating more triggers or more dysregulation?
Yeah. Oh, love it. Those are my favorite words, buddy. Yeah, you got it. And sequence, this is what's crazy. So, just as I went through my own journey as a practitioner, and I just happened to kind of parallel these paths as a parent, because, our oldest was born right before this, right? So you're studying this to help kids. And let's just be honest, you're studying this to help your own kids, right? Like, I got to figure this out to make sure we're figuring this out. And so my first undergrad is genetics, and we can come back and we can talk about predisposition and epigenetics, because they are at play. They've been at play, and we really got to get this turned around so they don't, make things worse going forward, because they are. But then I shifted to this pediatric perspective, and really, I taught it for literally until that night of that story. I taught it as it's just all these things. And so there was no order. There was no sequence to restoration and healing a kiddo. It was like, let's do as much as we can, as fast as we can. And I know I'm speaking right to the heart of parents there, because when your child is struggling with autism, especially level 2, level 3, and they've regressed, that's the toughest. When they were on track, when there was speech, when there was motor function, when there was socialization, and then it just slides off the cliff, that's when your heart leads you to say, let's do everything at once. So breaking apart the sequence. Again, I think I can use a case study, which is a story of one, which we now have literally through clinical observation, through thousands of chiropractors all over the world. And then we have this in research too. And we can link all the, what we call our perfect storm research in this. I'll get it to you guys to put in the show notes, because what I'm about to walk you through is proven in the data. This is not just, the experience of one or some. This is mapped together. So this dad, I was literally doing a consult with a 3-year-old recently diagnosed with autism last week. And the dad, awesomely, is a physician, right? So mom has been on fire, as moms are, and doing research in Facebook groups, podcasts, Instagram, healing the gut. She's taken out all offending foods. They have a perfect diet. They have detox. They're adding great supplements. She couldn't wait to talk to me about the vagus nerve. Like, this mom was my homie, right? She had it down. Well, dad, due to his training, he was slower on this, trust trained to get to these sort of things. And as far as he had come, he was fully supportive of the diet changes and nutrition, so attacking the gut core. But he was not yet ready to entertain this chiropractic vagus nerve, central nervous system conversation, because what had happened for their daughter is she had multiple reactions at 12 months, 18 months, and 24 months. So that would be a chemical reaction. So if we put it, it's important to separate these different types of stressors into at least three categories: physical trauma, chemical and toxic trauma, and then emotional trauma. Now, real quick, what I needed to teach this dad, I want to show the way God made our nervous system is it actually doesn't matter which kind of trauma of those three. In chiropractic, we call them the three T's: traumas, toxins, thoughts. The nervous system reacts to them the same. It goes into this fight or flight sympathetic response. And so this kiddo's case history, which they're trying to now reverse and restore, had a clear pin the tail on the donkey. Chemicals cause this. So we must take a nutritional chemical detoxification approach, and that'll get her better. And it was. They had seen some great improvements with like her digestion. She went from constipated to having stools at least every couple of days. She went from, not being able to fall asleep or stay asleep to at least once they got her to sleep, stay asleep. So some improvement had happened with nutrition, but they were talking to me because they weren't all the way out of the storm yet, right? And so digging into this child's case history, dad was just graduating and they were just opening their practices. Mom was office manager, helping them run. They were stressed to the max. She was anxious. She had 2 panic attacks, anxiety attacks during the pregnancy. So in research, that's called maternal distress. That leads to sympathetic dominance of mom. Mom's nervous system controls baby's developing nervous system, which is developing in utero, literally faster, bigger, better than ever. And so that'll set the tone of the nervous system to be stressed for the child. And then it was a lot of birth intervention, because a lot of times when mom has been disempowered and not supported, whole nother conversation for another day about pregnancy and HRV and all that. So there was a very traumatic birth, a failed induction that led to an emergency C-section with a heart deceleration. So the child's nervous system went through severe physical trauma as they got a hold of the child's head and neck physically with a big human set of hands and twisted and pulled and yanked her into the world as quick as possible. So she didn't latch. She didn't sleep. She got, it's a storm. So her nervous system was stressed from pregnancy to delivery. And the nervous system controls digestive motility, absorption and elimination, immune system and inflammation regulation. And the nervous system, what's called the central nervous system, vagus nerve, and brainstem, controls motor tone and coordination as well. So the moment that this girl's central nervous system got thrown offline, we call it subluxated or dysautonomia, then every other developmental system got offline, and she was left more susceptible to the toxic adverse reaction. So is that part of the equation? Dang straight. You can see it, right? You can't deny it. But what we do with PX doctors is we dig all the way back to the pregnancy, labor, delivery, early childhood. And I've taken thousands of those case histories, Courtney, where it's, if you just watching as a parent or a provider, you pin the tail of the donkey and you go, it was toxins. That's when the regression happened. But there was a lot that happened to that child's nervous system ahead of time. So we're going to get her all the way out of the storm, because we're going to get all the way down to the foundation, and we're going to make adjustments to access the vagus nerve, get the sympathetic nervous system to chill out a little bit, and get that side of the nervous system healing and reorganizing first.
Gosh, that makes us such a clear point that a lot of this starts before the baby is even born. I mean, because if you think about it too, correct me if I'm wrong, but the adrenal glands are pretty much fully formed in utero. And if mom is under a lot of stress, you could be borrowing off of baby. So whatever you're experiencing, and maybe you don't even feel like, I don't have a traumatic life event. If you have other kids and you're anxious, like all of that is now being translated into this new child that's not even out yet. So it's like, we don't really think a lot of times that toxins or whatever these exposures are, environmental. We're like, well, they're not even out of the womb yet. Like they're protected, they're in a bubble. But I mean, we know babies are born now because just what we found in the umbilical
Yep.
cord with over 280 different, chemical toxicities. So I mean, you've got the chemical toxicity side, but then you have the emotional side. So
Yes.
babies cooking with all kinds of factors before you're even out of
Yes.
the womb. And so I think that that's such an interesting point to make. So at what point, we've got the nervous system. Where does the microbiome fit into this picture?
Yeah, the microbiome has no chance if the central and autonomic nervous system stay in a sympathetic storm, right? So like this family is the perfect, it was like God's timing, because I was like, this is the intricacy of the conversation that families deserve to have, because that microbiome, you need to not continue to offend it, right? When it's already off track, and you need to support it with the right, but that can only go so far, because what happens first is the vagus nerve is not only going into the microbiome so the vagus nerve, moms and dads, is VAGUS. First off, it's in charge of calming. So Las Vegas is not calming. So think of the opposite of that, right? And so you have, which is, I always think it's kind of funny, but you have this vagus nerve branches from the brainstem. So it's actually a cranial nerve, nicknamed the wandering nerve. That's why birth trauma, C-section, forceps, cord wrapped, breech presentation is such a big deal. You can physically injure the vagus nerve, and it's a two-way street because the nervous system is. So the primary thing the vagus nerve does is it goes down into the gut, and it goes all the way down there, and it's going to report back to the brain what's happening. So if you have tons of inflammation and a wrecked microbiome, the vagus nerve is going to pick up on that. And yes, that's where you get gut-brain influence. Now it's going to send those inflammatory signals, and it's just going to tell the brain bad things are happening down here. But more in this conversation, it's not more importantly, because it's all important, right? It's all God's design. So every bit of it is important. The vagus nerve also goes and it controls motility, right? And it controls getting things moving. And if you can get the basics of detoxification is called poop. Right? It's just, to simplify it in my Iowa farmer way, we awesomely know about cytokines and immunoglobulins, and, we know all of this stuff now. But the way the body is designed first is there's just kind of this neurobiomechanical motility function. And what subluxation, maternal distress, these birth traumas do is they just stop movement. So that's your colicky, refluxy, constipated, eczema. If a child has eczema, their gut's not working because they will resort to the skin to get things out. The skin is our second gut in this way. So the vagus nerve needs to have full communication between brain and body, and specifically the gut, to get things going. And that includes get good stuff in, right, for nourishment and to seed the microbiome. And then the vagus nerve also has these other offshoots that really control the neuroinflammatory cascade. So they've done studies in animals where they get rid of the vagus nerve. They take these animals, same genetics, same sleep schedule, same exercise schedule, and most importantly, same diet. And they do what's called a vagotomy. And then they do a vagal nerve stimulation. So they electrically stimulate it. And those animals experience potently reduced intestinal inflammation. So we've seen kids improve their lab work again and again and again. So inflammatory cascades go down without changing diet, without adding supplements, just from chiropractic alone. So now though, there's one more chapter to that. So it's about the sequence of healing, just like it's the sequence of getting sick, right? Getting into the storm. So what we tend to do is focus very much for the first, depends upon the case. It's hard to put them all together. The more severe cases, you may need to focus on neurologically focused chiropractic alone and getting the nervous system and the vagus nerve back online for 3 months to 6 months, and actually not want to do too much else, because there is this construct of too much of a good thing to an overwhelmed, dysregulated system. But then if a child has these toxic influences in their life, what's awesome is we work with our network of providers, just like you guys are always bringing on here. And we can say, all right, we've got the foundation back online. Well, now they're going to handle improvements to the gut and the microbiome so much more. Now your child who didn't see any progress with PT and OT and speech, let's go back there, because we've done chiropractic, we've got their nervous system, and we can scan this, track this HRV. We can, this isn't just symptomatic tracking. This is actual functional objective tracking we use in our clinics. Now we will begin to add in these layers in a specific order later on. And all of a sudden, your child who wouldn't eat good foods because they're sensory stuck and the foods couldn't go in and they couldn't get them absorbed and they couldn't get them eliminated. Now everything opens up to you as a family once you get their vagus nerve and their nervous system back online.
This is so good. I mean, to summarize, from what I'm hearing, because this is really, really critically important for parents, because you're going to get such an onslaught of opinions
Yes.
from your pediatrician to the people you follow on Instagram. You're going to have someone say, well, your kid just has parasites, or, your kid just needs this supplement. But the order of priority matters. If the nervous system is locked into sympathetic dominance, if your child is in fight or flight all the time, there's no reason to go start hammering the microbiome with probiotics and herbs and everything else. I think that those can be helpful, and you can actually use herbs to help tonify the nervous system, but you've got to get the body and the brain to think that the body's safe enough that it can now heal. Because if you bypass that, you miss that, you're gonna be chasing something. You're chase your tail. I mean, you may get a little bit better, but then it's going to be really hard for you to really be able to see your child heal, and that gets frustrating as a parent. I mean, I know that as being a parent.
Yeah, it is. You nailed it. And I think it's the most important conversation. It's the one thing we're trying to make as many reels and write as many articles and do as many episodes on, because we're the only people saying it, right? That sequence. And so like I was down at this big, amazing conference documenting Hope. I should connect you with Beth and those guys. And they saved, now they understood this. I've been able to connect with them over years. So they had this 2 days of presenters, right? Dr. Mercola was down there, telling everybody you can't breathe, you can't eat. I always joke, right? His presentations are exciting. And you're also like, whew, going to be a rough day going forward, with that. But hey, somebody's got to set the bar. So anyways, I saw all these other presentations from PT, speech, detox, you name it, genetic sequencing in kids, right? So you can get to know their coding, make better lifestyles to match that. This is all great stuff, but it won't work if you try and do it all at once. And so they saved us for the end. And not only did every presenter, every parent make sense of this and be like, my goodness, you're talking my story. But the other presenters were so excited. And so I think that's where God has us positioned with PX Docs and with our platform to say, hey, let us not only do our job in terms of nervous system, getting it regulated and getting it back online, but we have built these networks, right? We're doing our work here. We're connected in this network, but all of our docs are trained to connect locally to a network as well. And we can put that we call it a care plan, right? That care plan may actually be 3 to 5 years when you really spread it all the way out to get your child to heal. But what's exciting, flipping this kind of confusion and overwhelm that parents live, flipping it on its head, what's exciting is when you can hear these conversations, see these conversations, and you can see it all in sequence and order. And the coolest thing is, Court, we can track this through the scans we use, right? So we use thermography, EMG, and HRV, which is the most exciting technology. So we can track neurological healing actually happening in a child. And then the protocols I figured out over the years is to say, okay, well, that's happening. Now we have what we call these neurometrics through those, and we can see these milestones of neurological healing, which open the door to say, it's microbiome time, it's PT, it's gross motor time, it's, cognitive, work time. And so now we can help parents get a plan that isn't just, yeah, like you said, Instagram. When I say Instagram together, I love it. We use it. You're here. That's the only way to get a start into the sequence, right? But it is unfair for parents to have to navigate this journey out of the storm, through the storm and out of the storm on their own. Because it took me 10 years of being a freaking doctor to figure it out, right? And so I just want parents to hear anything we're talking about today. Sometimes it's I have a not love relationship with my job because I got to take people backwards first, right? To kind of get clarity and understanding. But the whole journey backwards is to get things done in the right order going forward, because we know kids can heal. We have had, if you were to come, sorry, I'm on one now here, bud, but if you were to come hang in our office, you would have kids come up and talk to you calmly, full conversations, who when they started were nonverbal and wouldn't come into the office. And you wouldn't know it unless you had our case history that we have on them, right? And so healing is entirely possible. Parents, you are the heroes in this journey, finding this information. What you really need is that provider who can see the sequence and the batting order of nervous system foundation first, and then line up the ducks metaphorically going forward. And it's our biggest passion because it's just not out there, right? And so medicine gives no hope, no answers, traditional, but then sometimes functional and integrative and all that, that can be overwhelming, right? And feel like and I think parents innately know, like, anybody got a PDF I can download? Like a roadmap to say which one first? Yeah, we do now,
Yeah, this is really interesting because as a parent, you can spend so much energy trying to piecemeal something together. And I've done that, and it's
Yeah.
like, I think that if you're in the position where you have a child that is, if they're on the spectrum somewhere, or you're just like, we're dealing with the same behavioral stuff, the same sensory processing stuff, and I'm getting nowhere, like, you really do need to partner with somebody that can take you from start to finish. Because like you said, I think it was important to mention that it took several years, of just constantly getting together with your practitioner to be able to work with the child, because you can't just show up one time and then take one supplement and then try this and try that. Like, your things have to be rewired in a sense. And so you're retraining the nervous system, and that takes the same repeated things over and over and over again. And I remember doing that with my girls when they were younger, because they had tics. They had like these neurological tics. And it was like I'd get one.
Yep.
But I knew if we went 2-3 weeks without them being adjusted and getting worked on, instantly the tics would come back. The blinking, the head jerking, the clicking of the throat, like they would do it over and over and over again. And it took a couple years of
Yes.
being like in the office on a weekly basis. And when we did that for a couple of years, it was great. After that, like now we could spread those appointments out. We're really good. But I'm telling you, 5, 6, 7 years old, it was like, I just thought, this is a commitment. So, know as a parent, like, there are going to be some sacrifices, but it's worth doing it and going all in, as opposed to just, well, I'll just try it 1 or 2 times and see, and maybe that works, maybe it didn't work. And then, because you're having to address so much under the hood.
Yes.
What looks like just a symptom, it's going to take repeated exposures to resetting the nervous system, like getting the body to experience what it feels like to be in parasympathetic before it can really start to heal. And you've got to do it over and over. I'd love for you to share an example for somebody. That way, maybe they can just see what the roadmap could look like for their family. So if they've got a child that's maybe nonverbal, maybe they've been told, hey, you know what, your child has autism, they're somewhere on that spectrum, can you give us an example of a family or a story or a child where you've gone through, the nervous system, the microbiome, the diet, all of the different pieces, so that maybe a parent could kind of anticipate what that journey could look like?
Oh, 100%. Yes, because this is the best, right? The forward path is the best conversation period to have. And it's what we get to do all the time. My job is primarily more on the front end nowadays. Where God has me is, finding parents, having this conversation, getting them started. And then we built this incredible team here locally. We've got 8 docs at our office, and then we've got we now have PX docs worldwide as well, and sort of just certified another 50 doctors down in Atlanta this weekend with Life University. So what it looks like in that way, real quick, is we're coming to find you. We know you need us. We're going to find you. We're going to be here for you to do this. And so what it looks like is the first thing starts with a deep dive case history. So some clues, moms and dads, that you have found a nervous system focused chiropractor. Well, I guess the cheat code would be our website, pxdocs.com. You go to the directory. If they're on there, they've earned their way on there. Nobody goes on our directory that I haven't trained, and they know how to get the job done. No pansies there, Courtney. All right. No posers on the PX Docs website. All right. So when they're there, they have these things, and they will play. The care plan will go out like this. So first, there's a real deep dive into the case history. This kind of chiropractor is going to ask you questions no one else has before, because we're not chasing symptoms. We're going all the way down to the base layer, the pregnancy, the labor and delivery, and we're getting neurological information. We call it CSI, so chiropractic science investigation, and we go deep into that. The second thing that you must have in this kind of chiropractor is technology. They're called the insight scans. So it's infrared thermography, which is looking for regional dysautonomia and neurological inflammation. inflammation. And then you get EMG, which is a motor, right? So it's kind of like an EEG. So you're checking because motor development for a child is essential. That's why kiddos are proprioceptive seeking. That's why the spectrum kiddo is toe walking. The ADHD kiddo is moving. The sensory child needs deep pressure. The motor tic child is having motor tics because they're trying to get rid of this tension, right? In the motor system, neuromotor system. And then we use HRV. So for most children on the spectrum, I'll just start with severe and we'll kind of back our way from there. A child who is nonverbal, maybe having seizures, we would call that an intensive perfect storm case. Now, I want to sneak this in here too. We don't treat a dang thing. We don't treat autism. We don't certainly cure it. That's not how this works at all. The science of actually healing is not about a diagnosis and it's not about a treatment. It's about finding what's causing it and taking care of it. And I can't say it any more simple or complete than that. And that's a distinct difference than medicine and even some in natural. They're kind of using supplements or using therapies, right, to chase symptoms instead of getting to root cause dysfunctions. So the scans on a child who's level 3, locked in, nonverbal, they're going to go through what we call the 3 stages of subluxation. Sympathetic dominance, that's first, like we've been talking about. That's actually the baseline of neurological dysfunction. That's the first thing that'll happen. So sympathetic dominance, vagal nerve exhaustion. That's called dysautonomia. The second thing is then neurodevelopment gets off track. So we call that disorganization and dysregulation of the nervous system. So that's where the gut's going to be messed with. That's where all these other things are going to be messed with. But what happens with a lot of cases today, Courtney, and this is something we've just figured out the last few years, many of our, I don't like talking about this one because it's tough. Many of our kids, kids, have reached what we call neurological exhaustion and depletion. So we will see their HRV and their adrenals literally have given in. They're not even in sympathetic dominance anymore because they burnt out their sympathetics. Okay. Now, I used to see that a little bit in some moms, right? And some dads. We're like, yeah, tell me what I don't already know. I rolled it here with a extra large Starbucks, right? I got my Stanley filled with straight espresso, ready to go. 40 ounces of cortados. Anyways. But I had to lighten the mood there because when you see it in a child, which we've seen a whole lot more so prenatal distress we discussed today, what do you think the COVID years did to pregnant moms and babies with all the BS they put on them, right? And anyways, so in that case, many of our intensive kiddos, so I see kids in our clinic who fly in from all around the world for these tougher cases, we will actually adjust twice a day for 2 weeks. So that's our intensive kickstart. That is a heavy dose of vagus nerve autonomic neurological restoration and activation. From there, most care plans in this work look like a 6 to 8 month journey where you may start daily for a week or two to get momentum, to get your child, we call it the release phase. They're so sympathetic dominant. We just have to get something open to get reorganization and that happening and rebuilding happening. And then that reorganization and rebuilding can take usually does 6 to 8 months of 3 times a week and that sort of schedule because it's neuroplasticity. So it's like any other thing you want to improve upon. Repetition over time is the key. And that gets a child, especially if we're talking autism, that's going to get them out of the storm and to a really healthy baseline neurologically, where then you can really stack and layer on healing in a good way to get those things happening. And so what's exciting about that is now when you add those layers on, that's where you see what we call this launch point of kiddos really reach their speech comes back online. Their social emotional regulation comes back online. It starts with the last thing I should say about mapping this out. We see these changes not only on their scans, you can see this on what are called neurological soft signs. So parents, it's a long journey with a lot of trips and a lot of things. And so we have these scans to track changes, but you're also going to see your child start to finally sleep through the night. You're going to start to see your child actually poop without Miralax and prunes and suppositories and everything else, okay? You're going to see your child calm and not have massive tantrums and meltdowns during transitions. So there will be all of these neurophysiological soft signs and milestones along the way that'll tell us, hey, we're on the way to recovery. And I'll put a bow on it with this. That's always our freaking goal. I don't know how else to say it. I had a child 6 weeks in the NICU, wasn't supposed to live till age 1, seizures, autism, cerebral palsy. That's what they told us he was absolutely going to have. And the goal, what we've got is a 14-year-old winning cross country races, just infatuated with his girlfriend, like living his best life right now, you guys. And that was the goal. And so I'm a little different doctor than your average bear. And I think for every kiddo, and is there age, is there severity, is there scans? There's different factors that go into this. But when you see what we're talking about on this episode, when you can get the foundational neurological healing as well, and then add the layers of healing, I think you should set some really big freaking goals for your kids' healing and call it recovery and go for it and find somebody who knows how to get the job done and fire everybody who doesn't think you can. There, I said it.
That's incredible. Oh my gosh, fire everybody that, you know what, that should really be the mindset. And I think when you just get to a point where you're unwilling, I mean, listen, parents out there, like that is most parents. They're like unwilling to believe that a diagnosis is going to limit the potential of their child to develop or experience life the way that they believe that they should be able to experience it. So if you have that mentality, like, go out guns a-blazing, find the right person that gets on mission with you. So we also mid-interview this, we gained a host. So if you're listening,
the horrible thing is, Court, is like I didn't even get my mic set up, and I can't switch over to the mic. So if this is horrible microphone technology,
smooth, buttery, and velvety as always.
I'm telling you, man, the voice. That's right. No, I'm glad to hear about it. I mean, and I hate to jump on. I'm glad I got to jump on with you guys. I mean, but Doc, I mean, I wanted to ask that about the soft spots about healing. Yeah. When we talk about, one thing I was going to ask you is sometimes with patients when they're that young, is there like a connection between hardening of the brain, if this is what we're going in this direction of, with how much kids are like exposed to like iPads and the overwhelming? Is that something to that, like where they get hardening of the brain and then you have to reprogram? What's up with the iPads?
Yeah, it's a great question, because we actually, we've been writing a lot about this. So I love to talk about this, whether writing or videos or whatever. So I've written a ton of articles on there, right? And so one of the things we've taught internally to our docs, and then we've been finding the right words to say externally to the community. And a new research study just came out with sensory ADHD and autism and iPad, so screen exposure within the first year of life, which you're like, how do you study that? What would a kid, how would you get it? Oh, that happens. Okay. All right. And so, you have this, so we call it the 4th T. So, right, in chiropractic, we've always called it the 3 T's, right, brother man, of traumas, toxins, and thoughts. Yeah. In today's world, we're dealing with a 4th T of technology. And so you have with technology, and we can keep it simple, there is a absolute sympathetic tone to technology. So it is going to access a child's sympathetic nervous system and harden it and shift it into that. So sympathetic tone would be your tension and your hardening and that. And so that's the problem. And just like every other equation with neurology, that's what it triggers in a bad way. But the bigger problem is, well, if they're doing that, they're actually missing out on the way development is supposed to be, which is all over the place, which is parasympathetic, creative, investigation play. Like, one of our new young docs, this baby Goldie's in our life, right? And so these kids are just close to us. Kids, they're doctors on my team. And then they've had a beautiful baby, right? And when you know neurodevelopment and you watch the way they're taking care of Goldie, right? Which is just, Goldie's a part of life and she's learning it all before your eyes. And that is what you want to happen. So yeah, that's another factor shifting kids into this sympathetic perfect storm.
Well, I appreciate it, Court. Me and Court have been on together for a while, so this is good. It's like to have Dr. Tony, our boy, come on here. This is great. This is awesome. And Tony's got his own podcast going and rocking and rolling. So
we do. I have an amazing team who just tells me what to do. Everything. If you see me in a reel, I didn't come up with that reel. I was just told to, dance, monkey dance, right? And thankfully I'm a great wedding dancer, honestly. Raging Bull kiddos tend to, have great dance skills, all these things. Anyways, where I'm going with that is, what a great introduction to our podcast, the Experience Miracles podcast. There's no dancing on it. It's a podcast. But yeah, I'm sure we're going to collab like crazy here when this comes out. And you'll see it. But our podcast has caught fire fast because moms, need this. They know that, and they share this. So the Experience Miracles podcast with a bald bearded host is live and running now as well.
Hey, bald and bearded is rocking and rolling in social media. I'm telling you, man. And right.
I just want to know if the goats are going to make an appearance, because Dr. Tony has goats that I'm so jealous of farm life, but better make it to a reel.
One of the worst life decisions we've ever made is the goat. So if you're thinking of detoxing your children by by moving to a farm, I need you to hear this, because Instagram has us falling in love with farming. You should, everyone, okay? But not this kind of farming, right? Like, earn your Carhartt. Don't just wear Carhartt for Instagram. At least get some chickens, But so hear me on this, moms and dads. Goats, no, Courtney. Mini donkeys, though, those are your spirit animals. They are the greatest animals ever. So we might be doing a goat for donkey trade. If anybody's listening and they really want some Nigerian dwarf goats and they have 2 donkeys to trade, there you got a real look into the Tony Ebel wiring.
I mean, I will gladly take your goats. I just need to, submit that to the HOA and make sure they'll be fine with the little Nigerian goat. I just want to do goat yoga. That just seems very therapeutic. I feel like I would strongly, that would really help my parasympathetic activation. So
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Not sure it will, but you can come. So this summer, it's, we're recorded in the cold, but come up this summer. We've got 20 acres and we got a yoga. We love yoga. Christina and I love yoga. Let's do it, buddy. We got this.
I think that for every single video I've seen with goat yoga, guys, I've seen 10 extra videos of goats ramming people from behind without them actually seeing it, and creating more neurological dysfunction, more sympathetic overtone, and the need for chiropractic care.
Oh, so
if you're going to have a goat farm, I think you should have a mandatory chiropractor that lives right near you. Because
they're going to.
I'm sorry, when you start to do Sun Warrior, somebody going to get hurt. It's going to just bam.
You're an open target. So our lead, the leader of our goat mafia is, or cartel, I guess, is Pablo. And Pablo misses 0 opportunities to just steamroll you, just straight up. The moment you open that gate, you better be.
I mean, I got to be honest. I think having kids and goats as a parent, that's comedic relief. There's no way that's not going to make you laugh. So I need to,
that part you're dead on, buddy. We still have them because they are so stinking cute. It's just hard to explain. You're dead on.
Yeah. Oh man. I love that I got this on this podcast because I know that we've got everything entailed in this one. So
totally.
I know I got jumped in court on the mid part here, but when we talked about neurological training and your podcast is exploding, are you finding that, and Courtney, am I jumping in too quick? I don't want to
No, go for it. No, you know what? I'm happy you're here.
Oh, thanks. I am. I'm glad we're all here together. I really, I mean it. But when the podcast is taken off is because, you're giving parents the answers or giving them some insight about, when you say neurological training, when they have pretty bad issues. So I know you probably will, but for the listeners out there, you give them insight into how to help kids that let's say have chronic ear infections, chronic sinus infections, literally cannot get stuff out of their head, and you show them and talk about those kind of things, how it affects their neurology.
Yeah, we do. So the way the podcast is mapping out, we have solo episodes that I will go through. So the first foundational ones are the kind of the bigger pictures all together, the perfect storm, talking about birth trauma, maternal distress. And so after we've presented it all together, and you can see me smiling here because I love this stuff so much. We are doing deep dive episodes on every individual element of it, right? So we just recorded one on preconception and HRV. So the fertility journey. We're going to record one. I did a deep dive on birth trauma. We're going to take on the microbiome and, overuse of antibiotics. And so what's cool, the way the podcast maps out, I will do a deep dive into the science and the way God made me with kind of the Iowa farmer, I can go deep into the science, but then make simple sense of it, be able to just really explain it. And so each of those deep dive episodes goes deep into these individual topics and then leaves you with action steps. Okay, now that you know this, do this, right? And we make the connections from that. And then what's really cool, because, the science is cool, but stories are cooler because stories bring relatability. And so the podcast is full of interviews with parents who have gone through the storm and got
Brilliant.
to the other side. And
Brilliant.
so we interview them and go through. And actually, one of them that's coming out soon, with our intensive program, we have helped a lot of young adults with seizures and dysautonomy and depression. So one of the ones coming out is actually with Cole and Francesca. I actually interviewed the patients who were two kids who tried to take their life, right, due to their neurological storm, and are now taking on life full measure. And so it is a really rad podcast because it's full of science. And then we're interviewing, then we have you guys coming on, right? And Dr. Josh is coming on, and we'll get into that stuff too. But so there'll be this parallel track of the science and the experts and the doctors, and then the parents to make sure, hey, this is what we did. Step 1, step 2, step 3. And so that's the design of the podcast. And we just know that God has called us to get it out there because, one, the conversations we're having to these deep dives of nervous system dysfunction and these things, they're not out there. They're not in other places. You can't cold plunge your child out of colic. It's just not a good idea. All right. And you don't take them to the sauna after that either. So that's just a funny way of saying any conversation around nervous system regulation is on fire, right? On social, we're all doing it, but who's doing it for our kids? We are, in the safest, gentlest way. And it's exactly what they need because it's not genetics. And actually, even before gluten and toxins and all these things show up, their nervous system got jammed up. And so we're going to take parents there with the information for sure, but we're going to take them there with the application and the connection to our PX Docs tribe.
That's a good point. That's brilliant. I think with parents and in court, and both of you guys can really, add in because maybe I'm off key, but like when a parent sees, like when you say like nervous system distress, the research that shows about how much stress a young one goes in, even in the womb, about how much, stress is input into their biological systems. And, then a parents, they don't even think or even know that they have options of chiropractic care because all they ever hear is like, oh, it's just snap and pop. Yep. And they're like, I don't want my kid to get popped or snapped. But, with your techniques and with your social media, you show that there are different techniques and different ways you can actually, to actually regulate those stressors and get them out of the system. So like your brain and the body can actually see them differently. Are you getting on the podcast, Doc? Are you getting like, I guarantee you there has to be people like, I know this works for my kid, but how do you actually work on kids? They'll say like, how gentle is it? Yeah. How soft can it be? I know we're getting close to time. I'm sorry. I'm taking too much time.
These are essential questions because once people move in this direction, as you should as a parent, they're like, okay, this makes perfect sense. I'm going here. And then you get to that next phase or kind of category of questions. How's this work? My child despises doctors. You go into autism, our conversation, my child despises doctors. They've been poked and prodded. And so even you'll see inside of a PX Doc's office, like we help them choose their location for their office. So it's sensory friendly. We talk about freaking paint colors and design. And so it's sensory friendly. We hire people who are, so if you think of a medical office and you walk in and it's all buttoned up and nobody likes to be there and everybody's grumpy, go to the opposite. Okay. And that's what it's like walking into one of our healing literally happens freaking rolling in the door. And I know that sounds a little airy fairy, but there's neurology to that. Okay. With how this happens. And so the way a child gets adjusted is so calm and so gentle. And actually the more they're in sympathetic dominance, this is part of the technique training, the lighter and easier we need to make the adjustments, but the more frequent then, right? Because of this neuroplasticity, like you were talking about perfectly before, Court, like it takes repetition over a long period of time. And the more locked in a child is, the lighter we need to go and the more frequent we need to go. So that's what, like we just got done training. We have almost 700 of our docs have gone through our cert course with Life University. Like you guys have your certification, right? With Life through Functional Med. That's who supports us as well. And it's been amazing to see, because it's actually kind of simple once you put it on paper and say, okay, this is your case, this is your assessment, this is where you start, and this is where you go. And most children, literally within a couple of adjustments, they can be locked in, nonverbal, want no one touching them. And within a couple of adjustments, most of our nonverbal autism kiddos will take our hands and place our hands on their neck and come to us. I mean, it happens all the time. I'll be seeing, I'll be in public and, when I leave the farm, and am out and about and we see our patients and they just come to us, and they don't have to talk to say, hey, you're helping, keep going. Sometimes they want more than we can give them, right? Because you got to be patient with it, right? They're like, more adjustments. They're like the burnt out mom. They're like Courtney and Christina. You sure you got it all? Yes, lady. We got you. Come back tomorrow.
That's right. I mean, it basically becomes your family. I feel like.
Yep.
We were in the office so many times when the kids were little, and it does make a difference. Like when they're sick or they've got an ear infection, like having somebody that can manually work on your child. And I'm glad that we brought up, because if you've never been adjusted or you've never had anybody work on you, do any type of any actual body work, like it can be kind of scary because you're like, I don't know, like, is this, but I can tell you, like, the experience is totally different. Like it's not, you just cannot compare it to any doctor's office visit that you've had with a general practitioner or pediatrician. So, and it's so gentle because, you're getting somebody that's actually trying to understand your body before they're putting their hands on your body. They really want to understand like what is going on deep down so that we can really create the best experience for your body and not contribute to the stress load. So, but again, like it's that working hand in hand with someone. And it can be so encouraging. I mean, I'm always encouraged by having both of you in my life because I know I have people to go to, because I don't know everything, but you spent your life work doing this, Dr. Ebel. So it's like, it's incredible that especially now that you have this podcast, like make sure you guys follow that platform, because Expect Miracles podcast, I mean, it's going to help you tremendously if you are deep in the weeds in this. And you're not alone. So, know that you're not the only one. I mean, gosh, where we started talking about the statistics, 1 in 6 children. I mean, there are a lot of parents that are facing similar struggles. So don't ever feel like, you've got to climb the mountain by yourself.
And, I was thinking, and here's what's great. So colic, chronic ear infections, constipation, acid reflux, speech delays, gross motor delays, sensory challenges, kids don't grow out of those. That's on the way to these chronic challenges. And so what's even, not to make light of any of them, that's exactly, but what's even easier for us to adjust and help out with is those things. So really, if you're hearing what we're picking up here, the best time to start is before you even become pregnant. So moms, I know, the majority of our listeners on both of our podcasts are moms. If you're finding this actually even ahead of time, that's our dream. That's our prayer, to regulate your nervous system, to get your gut, to get everything healthy in this way ahead of time. And so wherever this conversation is finding you, it's the perfect right time now to get connected. So you follow us on Instagram. So at PXDocs on Instagram, go to the website, pxdocs.com, and then the Experience Miracles podcast, because we'll get you the resources and the understanding. But that whole platform was designed to get you connected to the practitioner, to the community. And I love that you snuck that in there too, Cora. We do. You need a tribe. So what's cool about our practices is we build community around our practices. You guys know Jackie, our head office lady, and everybody else. Like, that's who you want in your life. You want those people full of empathy, relatability, and that are going to not only cheer you on, but, help you know where to move forward and when to move forward. It's our favorite part of the adjustment. Yeah, I'm a chiropractor. It's freaking awesome. It's so cool, to lay your hands on people and get them better. But just the empowerment, the community, those components of it, it's essential to healing. And moms and dads, you got to heal. You want your kid all the way out of the storm? You got to heal with them. You have to put yourself, we got to check your HRV. We got to see where your nervous system, dysregulation is, because, God designed us. We're literally a family connected together. And even, the one thing that tethers us together more than anything else, more than our flipping genetic code, is our nervous system and our lifestyle. And so as you're on this journey to help your child heal, just sneaking this in overtime here a little bit, make sure you don't wait till never, and don't even wait till last. Join that. Our practices are ready to do that too.
I agree. I think it's a good point. I think that everybody listening out there, it's like when patients come in, and you see it all the time when a mother, loves her children, or father loves his children. But, like I guarantee you, Courtney and you, and like the mothers, are usually will say, I'm going to take the kids in before I get treated. And I'm going to go, no. Mama bear gets treated as much as the children do. And And I think it's pliability. Like when people realize, like, yeah, you're in a state like of being a caretaker, and you're hardwired. and getting treated can be totally different than your child being treated because they're in a pliable state. And that's the beauty of your expertise, is that people out there are like, what does that mean? I'm like, you can go to a doctor that knows how to treat an adult and a child. And it's completely different in some ways. In some ways, like, because you know the routines. I don't know all those routines. I have some ideas. But when you think about how pliable a little one is, and then, it's like a parent, a mother looks at a child and goes, well, how can I take care of this? I'm like, children are treated completely different. But, the mother needs to be treated as well to get her body into the shape. So for everybody listening, I think that it is, one thing for you to all learn from this is that if you're taking care of your children, you better get taken care of yourself and start putting some emphasis on yourself. I wish I could have been here for the whole thing. This is great.
It's a cheat code and a fast track to healing. And don't worry, you're coming on my podcast. I mean, I can say my podcast now. All right. So funny stories, right? So the first week it went off, right? And we did a big launch. We sent it out to our socials, which have blown up. And then we have all of our doctors and they sent it out. And so I text you guys, we made top 100. And the very next day after it made top 100 in health and fitness, we were traveling with my two best friends, my two nerdy dude docs, So it's Dr. Jake and Dr. Matt and I, and we had all sorts of fun parodying. Like they opened the truck door for me and gave me a warm towel. They're like, oh, we have a top 100 podcast host. It was, and if you guys know me, listen, it was the most uncomfortable, fun Instagram reel we've ever made. We want it to be like, come on, Huberman, come on. We're coming because I've listened to Huber. Oh, geez, I'm going to do it. I listened to the whole 2-hour podcast about autism. They didn't even come close to getting to the root cause of autism. Not even close. And so you better believe we pray and plan for God to take us to the top, because we don't want to be there for us. We want to be there for you. This podcast, these homies I get to connect with here, we're coming through this for you, for your child, because it's exactly what they deserve and they need. So yeah, we'll keep working our butts off to make it just a wildly impactful podcast for you. And we'd love for you to go there, subscribe it, and share the heck out of it.
Oh, well, this has been good. You're going to be climbing even more, and just you're getting up to that top of that hill, man. And I'm really proud of you, brother. I mean, you just keep rocking and rolling. Courtney and I will keep cheering you on, and Courtney will probably adopt your goats.
I mean, if I took away, I would say a top 3, thing for this podcast for me is the goats. So I mean, there's a lot of clinical pearls and applications that are super valuable, but I put the goats up there, I'll put them up there.
they help your Instagram take. Everybody loves a goat. It's kind of like they love a goat. So I am very underutilizing. The top thing, I am underutilizing the goats with our Instagram game for sure. I'm talking to Christina instantly when we get done with this. And, once a week minimum goat posting.
Oh, heavens to Betsy. Here we go.
That's your ticket to stardom right there.
Oh, man. This has been good. This is good.
This has been great.
Oh man, guys. I mean, we covered so much ground on this episode, and I know that, we went super deep, but we're always solution oriented here, and we want for things to be relevant to your life, not only relevant, but we want for you to have action steps. We want you to have tools. We want you to have resources, things that you can access that are going to change your life, your family's life for the better. And I think what you said earlier, Dr. Ebel, about not diagnosing or just treating, that's not even a consideration. It's just what is the body presenting with, and how do we support the body to heal so that it gets to a place where it's doing what it always was designed to do. And I think that even having that mentality is so huge, because when you start looking at the diagnosis as this big 800-pound gorilla in the room, then you all of a sudden look at the opportunity for your body to be able to heal. So make sure, I know we talked about some of these resources and some of the statistics and the data, and I mean, it's all backed by research. That's what's incredible. And I love that you brought that up too throughout this conversation. So we're going to put all of that in the show notes. We'll also link the original episode that we did. I believe it was number 169. So if you're just tuning into us, we did another interview last year with Dr. Ebel that was phenomenal. We'll link his podcast, Expect Miracles. You can follow him on so many different social platforms. And, we picked up Dr. Motley along the way for the conversation. So it's been a great time.
Found him alongside the Colorado Trail, didn't we?
Oh yeah. I was like, who's that half Asian guy hitchhiking on the side of the road?
He looks
Pick him up.
He looks too tall and skinny to snowboard. Let's save him here. Let's get him over here.
Oh, everybody do their things, like I keep myself in that out of injury lane.
There
So,
you go,
but it's been great. This has been good. I'm glad I got to jump in, guys. Thanks so much. Love you guys.
So good. All right, guys. Well, if you love this episode, we'd love to hear from you. Send us a DM at the Health Institute, or you can hit us up on our individual platforms. Share this podcast. Connect with us in any way. We love hearing from you. Leave us a review if you felt that this was supportive for you. And we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks for tuning in.